In life, we all encounter obstacles, and those obstacles come in all different shapes, sizes, and forms. The question is, how do we handle those obstacles? Do we attack them head on, or do we allow them to make us quit? Welcome to the No Quit Living podcast, where we aim to motivate and inspire listeners to never give up on themselves, their dreams, or their goals. We will interview successful people from all walks of life as they share their no-quit stories when they had the choice to give up or give in, but they didn't. We thank you for listening, and we hope to be that jolt of positivity as you go for your greatness. Welcome to episode number 228 of the No Quit Living podcast. I'm your host, Christopher J. Worth, and today's theme of the day is proving yourself right. Our quote of the day comes to us from Jarvis Duval Gaydon. Don't live to prove someone else wrong, but to prove yourself right. Today's episode is sponsored by Con. Your journey is your story. Con is a lifestyle jewelry brand that simply exists to embody your unique personal journey and remind you that no matter how difficult life can be, anything is possible. Be the dream, be the change with Con. Follow at Con Life, QAN, and support the mission at conlife.com, QANLIFE.com. It is my pleasure to bring you today's episode. Our guest happens to be a former Major League Baseball pitcher that has no regrets when it comes to the end of his career. Jonah Bayliss left it all out on the mound, and I love some of the perspectives he shares with us today, especially when it comes to both internal and external motivation. I hope you enjoy today's episode. Jonah, I'd like to welcome you to the No Quit Living podcast.
It is a pleasure, absolute pleasure to be here.
I appreciate it. So the first question I ask everybody is, are you ready to bring it today?
Of course, got to bring it every day, man. You can't just get out of bed and half-ass anything. You got to bring it every single day, every single minute.
Preaching to the choir, love it. So, as you know, the number one objective of our show is to motivate and inspire listeners to never give up. And I was curious if you had either a no-quit story yourself or perhaps a really challenging time that tested you and you could have given up or given in, but you didn't.
Yeah, sure. So the event that kind of comes to mind is I think maybe perhaps slightly different than what you would typically hear, because it doesn't have that Hollywood ending, so to speak. But so I played professional baseball for quite some time, and affiliated. I was with the Royals, Pirates, Rays, Astros. I'm forgetting somebody. Blue Jays, I think, were in there somewhere. But at any rate, essentially you reach a time where the phone stops ringing every off season, and it's kind of a tough pill to swallow. You become sort of unwanted. You find yourself at roughly 30 years old as a right-hand reliever, and how many of those are there? And so, but you still got it. You still think you have it, and it was hard. It was very hard pill to swallow. And I remember having a conversation with my wife and with family members and those closest to me. And basically the ultimatum I came to was I couldn't quit, so I went on and I played 2 years of independent ball. And the reason that I say it's not quite your storybook ending is because I never made it back. I know it would be a lot nicer if I could sit here and tell you the story and be like, yeah, and I didn't give up and I made it back to the major leagues, but I didn't. But the reason I bring this story up is because I think it's important to know that it's not always about the ultimate end success that you're looking for. And what I mean by that is, because I went on and I played another 2 years, essentially what I did was I emptied the tank. And if I had quit immediately, having received no phone calls from affiliated baseball, and I had just said, you know what, this is too hard. I don't want to go down this road anymore. I'm done with this. I can almost guarantee you I'd be sitting here today wondering, well, what if I get in it one more year? What if I had one more opportunity? And what those 2 years of independent ball allowed me to do is sort of solidify that question and eliminate that what if, and that it doesn't exist anymore. I emptied the tank. I did everything possible in my power to continue playing baseball, and it just didn't work. But knowing that I exhausted every avenue that I could means that it was out of my control. And I can't focus on the uncontrollables. And so that makes me okay with not playing baseball anymore, if that makes any sense.
No, it makes a lot of sense. And I loved how you touched on you can't control the uncontrollables, because something that we often talk about on our show is controlling the controllables. And I think the really interesting part about your story is that you did make it to the major leagues, but you continued, and as you said, you emptied your tank. And it's not about always the end result, but it's about living your life and living your career and never having to wonder what if. And I think the flip side is so many people don't even give it that first attempt, don't even make it, because they get knocked down that first time and say, you know what, maybe professional baseball or maybe being an actor or fill in the blank isn't for me. And I think you took it to that next level. And those last 2 years playing independent baseball, you now have zero questions. You have zero doubt. And I think that's the best part about your story, because it's about the entire story. It's not just about just the beginning or just the end. So I appreciate you touching on that. And I wanted to ask you if you could tell the listeners just a little bit about who you are and what you're doing today.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in Massachusetts, a little tiny town, Williamstown, Mass, and went to small Division III school, Trinity College, down in Hartford, Connecticut. I got drafted by the Royals in the 7th round and went on to play affiliated baseball for, I think 8 seasons it was. I had an opportunity to play in Japan. I made it up, as you mentioned, with the Royals and the Pirates for parts of 3 different years, 05, 06, 07. I have some unbelievable memories, enjoyed every second of the road. And that ended, and I got hit with the ultimate, the consummate athlete ultimatum is, that ends. And I've been pursuing this since I was literally 8 or 9 years old. And here I am all of a sudden 33 and jobless, and wondering, what skills do I have other than throwing a baseball pretty hard, which is slightly unapplicable to the real world. But at any rate, so I got into coaching, and I found some fulfillment in the coaching area, teaching the younger generations how to pitch and just play baseball for that matter. But it wasn't quite the fulfillment that I had envisioned, I think. I had always searched for a way to sort of validate the decade that I spent chasing this dream of baseball. And so I knew that I wanted to do something that pertained to it or revolved around it. And naturally, I thought that was coaching. And I think you had a friend of mine, Brian Kane, on the show. And he had been trying to get me into mental performance for a little while. And I just kind of, for no real particular reason, just sort of hesitated. And long story short, he kind of finally talked me into it. And that's when it hit me. It hit me that the coaching, the mental side of it was the void that I was looking for. And let me explain that. So when you're teaching a physical skill of pitching, what you're doing really is you're teaching a kid, so most of the kids I worked with were high school kids. So like 15, 16, 17 ish, somewhere in there. So when I teach them the physical skill of pitching, I'm giving them a tool that they can use for, if everything goes really, really well, that they're going to use for another 4 to 5 years. If it goes like extremely well, they're going to use it for another maybe 10 years. And then on top of that, you're limited to the number of kids you can reach and the lives you can impact because you're so skill and sport specific. And it dawned on me that teaching the mental game, you are now giving individuals the skills and the tools that they can use for the rest of their life. And then on top of that, your net that you can cast, and i.e. the lives that you can impact, is much, much greater because you're no longer limited to just baseball pitching. The tips and tricks and everything that I learned in baseball, were from baseball, but they apply anywhere. They apply to business. And so that's how I got into what I'm doing now, which is a system that I developed, in my own sort of retrospect of my career, which is, it's called Prove Yourself Right. And what it is, I mean, it's performance coaching in a way. And where prove yourself right came from was a phrase that I found myself continuing to repeat over and over and over again. And where it stems from is we spend so much time and effort trying to prove other people wrong. But when in reality, you know, the sweet spot is when you start trying to prove yourself right. In other words, by internalizing your motivation, you can create concrete commitment. When the motivation is external, okay, when it's, you know, your high school coach who, you know, I was the number 5 pitcher on my high school team. And sure, you know, I thought I could be better than that. And sure, I had those moments of where I was like, you know, I'm going to prove him wrong, you know, and I'm going to pitch in college. Those moments work, though. That type of external motivation, which is I'm going to prove this person wrong, or I'm going to do it for this other reason, it works. It, as what I like to call just a spark. It can spark your motivation. It can spark your commitment, but it's not going to sustain it. When you learn to internalize that motivation and understand that you're doing this to prove something to yourself, now that motivation is within you. And so it's entirely within your control. We just talked about controllables and uncontrollables. Now it's entirely within my own control. And once the motivation is in my control, that means the commitment is in my control. And so, you know, I kind of went around developing that in the past year or so, and that's where I'm at today. I go around, I talk, I do, you know, hit up some schools and some teams, and just try to spread the message, man. It's, you know, it was a valuable one to me, one that I could, you know, I mean, I could share 100 examples on this show with you. But just for the sake of keeping time short, just know that I found myself in so many situations understanding that, or realizing that what got me there was the motivation to prove something to myself. I wanted to find out for myself how good I actually was.
I appreciate you going into the depth of what you shared, and I think it's very interesting. And being a former college athlete myself and a former high school, AU, and college coach, I think some of the foundation we have and we've learned and we've achieved through sports is definitely an overlap. But I really absolutely just loved how you touched upon the component of internal versus external. And I talk all the time that it's good to have people that motivate you from the outside, such as coaches or teammates. And obviously, if you play professional, you have a manager or possibly owners. But if your external motivation is stronger than your internal, and what we talk about is if someone holds you to a higher level of accountability than you hold yourself to, it's probably not going to sustain itself for a long period of time. And I think the best of the best and fill in the blank are those people that have both the external and the internal. And I think that takes it to a whole new level. So I wanted to ask you an interesting question. If you had to define yourself, but you could only use one word, what would that word be?
Gosh, I'm going to... I hope this doesn't come across as a cop-out, but I'm going to choose internal. The word internal, you know, it's like I said, it was a belief system. It was in it, and it wasn't something that I was conscious about to begin with, but it just sort of developed. And my mentality when I was pitching was every time I took the mound was every single. I always had a belief that I was good and that I could do something special with baseball. But I was never highly recruited out of high school. I ended up at a Division III school but I don't want to call it a chip on my shoulder because I feel like that's so cliche. But I had that mentality of, you know what, I can do this. And it's not that I thought other people thought I couldn't. It's just that I felt like I wasn't in the right spot at the right moment. And so what I found, the mentality I developed when I was pitching was every single batter that steps in the batter's box was an opportunity for me to prove to myself that I belong where I am. And obviously, as you pitch, and you give up hits and walks and home runs for sure, you're gonna lose a couple of battles, but the war wages on. And so, guess what? You walk a guy, you lost that individual battle, but there's another guy stepping in right behind him. And, it was through that I developed my awareness of, again, proving to myself that I could accomplish this. Because the thing with proving other people wrong, I'll throw an example out there, a hypothetical. Let's go back to the high school coach, and let's say, he tells you to your face one day, hey, you're never going to play college sports, right? Now I'm going to prove him wrong. And so you go and you play college sports. You're home for Thanksgiving break, and you see him, you're at your old high school at a basketball game, and you see him in the gym. You say, hey, coach, remember how you said I wouldn't play college sports? Well, I want to let you know that I made the team. And he says, I knew you would. There's something along those lines, right? Like, and all of a sudden, like your whole basis, your whole foundation for your commitment and your motivation is frail. But perhaps what actually happened was the reason you got upset because he said, he quote unquote doubted you, was because it's not because the reason you're mad at that is because you have a belief that he's wrong, or that your coach is wrong. So no one's actually proving anybody wrong. You're always proving yourself right, no matter what, if you break it down that way.
No, I love how you break it down that way, because I think that's comes to a point. I think we all have a point, or many points in our life, where it goes from proving others wrong versus proving you right. And I think we all get tested and challenged. And that's kind of the whole basis behind our No Quit Living podcast, as well as our company, is that we all encounter those obstacles and challenges. And so many of us get knocked down so many more times than we win, or we have those great victories. But it's not about that. It's about the fact that you keep going. And I think it's really important how you touched on that. One of the things we often touch upon is the importance of a daily routine. And I was curious if you had either a morning or a daily routine that you swear by.
I can't say swear by, but I do have routines. The reason I don't say swear by is because I have found, especially in minor league baseball, with your travels, I tried not to get too hinged on like very specific routines because of the place that it would put me mentally if I couldn't accomplish it for some reason. Now, with that said, I have general practices that I like to try to implement every single day. General rule of thumb is anything on my calendar, anything on my schedule, I try to be up 2 hours before that. So if example, my daughter gets on the bus to go to school at 9:00, I want to be up at least by 7, at least. I try to get my exercise in the morning, first thing. It doesn't always happen, but again, it's kind of a general rule of thumb. And then, before going to bed, I try to lay out the day ahead, and it doesn't always happen. And I think that's part of the key is to understand that. I think it's important to have sort of these routines that you're at least trying to stick by, but I do think it's also important to be flexible with them. I found myself because I went down the road of I got to do this. I got to get up in the morning and I have to do this, and then I'm going to read for 30 minutes, and then I'm going to work out, and then and then it's going to be stretching, and then it's going to be breakfast, and it's going to be this, and and everything. I tried to, because I thought that was going to give me a key. And what I found was I would get almost anxious when I forgot something, or let's say you're mapping out the day, like you're laying in bed and all of a sudden like, oh man, I didn't map out tomorrow for whatever reason. Life happens. Like I mentioned, I got a kid, and I might have all the intention in the world as we speak right now. I might have all the intention in the world to sit down at 5:30 or 6 o'clock tonight and map out my day for tomorrow. But life happens, and it happens quite a bit. And I might find myself laying in bed and all of a sudden go, oh crap, I haven't mapped out my day tomorrow. And you know what? Long story short, what I've learned is that's okay. Okay. Just adjust and give yourself an extra 10 to 15 minutes tomorrow morning, and then try to get back onto your schedule the next day. Because in the past, when I first got into, trying to be rigid with my routines, I would freak out. I'd be laying in bed and I would freak out. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't have my day mapped out. And I would kind of let it carry me into the next day, that sort of negative, those negative emotions and feelings, that would kind of carry in the next day. And I'd be like, oh, and I'd wake up like, oh, this day's a wash. Like, it's not even planned. I don't even know what to do. So I think it's great to have a template to work off of, but also as in anything in life, you have to be flexible and able to adjust.
I love how you touched on the one piece is when you have that day that gets away from you in the morning. It's what happens. Most of us is we fixate on well, I didn't do this right. And like you said, it goes into the next afternoon or the next day. And I think what we need to do, and I fall guilty to myself, is you need to be able to say, okay, today or this morning didn't go the way it's planned. It's fine. I have to be flexible and I'll start over, this afternoon or tomorrow. And I think so many of us think about what we didn't do as opposed to what we did do. And the reality is we have a new day today or a new day tomorrow. And to use your analogy, you walk that batter, right walking up to the plate is the next batter. So I think we need to take that approach into life as well. Wanted to pick your brain and see if you're reading anything currently or if you've read anything recently that you'd like to recommend to our listeners.
I'm a big audiobook guy. I do a little bit of driving here and there, and I'm a big audiobook guy. It's so hard to kind of to pick one. I listen to so many different types. There's David Goggins' book, Can't Hurt Me. Yeah. I mean, it's the story is just so incredible. I mean, it's unbelievable. And it's hard. It's hard to put yourself in those shoes, and it's such an inspiring book. That's a great one. The Rise of Superhuman by Stephen Kotler.
Is that a new book? I've not heard of that one.
2014. It's pretty wild. I'll just real quick. It's pretty wild. It dives deep into flow state. So the zone, if you will. And it talks a lot about, there's been a ton of research on it, but it talks a lot about like extreme athletes and how they access a flow state in order to do what they do. Obviously when there's a lot more on the line physically, than getting in the zone in baseball versus getting in the zone for, I don't know, aerial skydiving or something. The consequences are much greater. I mean, yes, we don't want to fail at either one, but if I fail at one of these, I could potentially die. Whereas if I fail at throwing this baseball, chances are I probably won't. So they went around and they kind of interviewed and researched and analyzed all these extreme athletes. And, for anyone into performance and enhancing performance and all that stuff, it's really great. It's kind of eye opening because they start to tease you with the idea of, this flow state, this sort of area in our brain that we have kind of, or I shouldn't say always thought, I think most of us think it just comes naturally. Like it just appears all of a sudden. Their point is, we can access this. If we know how to look for it, we can actually access it so that, I'm going into a pitching, I'm starting tomorrow, or let's say I'm a business person. I got a sales pitch tomorrow, whatever it may be. And maybe I got to give a speech or a talk or whatever it is. I can access my flow state if I know exactly what I'm looking for.
No, I have not heard of that book, so I appreciate you recommending that. Wanted to switch lanes here for a second, and assuming the 20-year-old version of yourself would have listened, what's the one piece of advice you would have liked to have given the 20-year-old version of Jonah?
Listen. Man, yeah, no, I was stubborn.
I think we all get to that point when
was,
when we're 20 years old, or even after, sometimes for men up to, maybe 30, 35.
Sure. Yeah. No, there's the quintessential take it all in, that it's one of the things I wish I'd done a better job of throughout my playing career. I started to do it towards the end. Maybe subconsciously I started to, have the feeling that the ride was over. So I tried to take it in more. But the places that baseball took me to, some of them, I wish I had my eyes and ears open a little bit better. And then in all seriousness, I say, listen, it kind of remarked me a little bit when I look back at the fact that, I had these, when you're playing professional baseball, you have professional pitching coaches, and, just, they're all trying to help. And not necessarily that you have to listen to everyone, but something I used to tell my young athletes all the time is that, and still do for that matter, is that everybody has something that you can take with you. So, I can recall pitching coaches that I didn't see eye to eye with, or even managers or whoever it may be. And when I was young, they would just get written off. And it was, you put up the wall, you put up the defense mechanism, and I'm not going to listen to this advice. I'm going to nod my head and so that there's no confrontation. But it was a very ignorant, in a way, wall that you put up just because you didn't see eye to eye on a certain topic. But every single person has a nugget of information that you can take with you and you can use to benefit you in your situation. And it's up to you to find out what that is.
I think that's great advice, and it's something my father always told me, is you can learn from everybody. It might be what to do, maybe what not to do, but the biggest
exactly.
part.
It could be what not to do. Yeah, exactly.
No, but the interesting perspective that you said too is you have to be willing to listen, and I think as an athlete, you just have that competitive side as you, and like you said, with managers or a pitching coach, it's not always that you don't see or you have to see eye to eye with them, but sometimes you're just fixated on what you're doing, and the reality is, obviously, like you said, you can learn from others. So if I had the opportunity to give you a chance to have dinner with anybody, dead or alive, who would you pick?
Wayne Gretzky.
I gotta ask why.
So hockey was my main sport in high school, early high school. It sort of became baseball, but man, I was infatuated with hockey. And so that's, you're talking 1986 to 96, roughly. So, Gretzky hit the scene in 79, and, it was just, the timing was perfect. And then on top of that, what kills me, and again, I may be biased, I'll admit, but because I'm such a big hockey fan and Wayne Gretzky fan, is that there's all this talk about Tom Brady. I'm a huge Tom Brady fan too, but there's all this talk about Tom Brady versus Michael Jordan, as to who's the greatest of all time. Has anyone ever stopped to look at Wayne Gretzky's records?
No, it's unfortunate. I think it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. Where, like you said, he came on the scene in '79 and he was there through the early '90s, and unfortunately, that's when Jordan was just kind of getting to his peak, and then Tom Brady came over. But I'm not a huge hockey guy. I'm a big time basketball guy, but his records are unbelievable. But I think it's kind of one of those out of sight, out of mind, where it's people talk about Magic Johnson and they talk about Larry Bird, but now it's a lot of people talk about LeBron. So I think it's interesting how, as generations pass, unfortunately, people get some ways forgotten.
Yeah, of course, and I totally get it. I know hockey is in the grand scheme of things, is not as popular as the other sports and all that stuff. Like I said, this is coming from a hockey fan, but his records are unbelievable. But on top of that, aside from his records, I mean, just the other stuff. Like, I mean, he came into the league at like 17, 18 years old. I mean, to be playing in the NHL that young, and and on top of that, he did it. As far as I know, and as far as I think most of us know, he did it with grace. It was he was kind of like a Derek Jeter, if you will. Avoiding the tabloids and always, saying the right stuff and putting the right foot forward. And there's a couple of athletes like that come to mind. I mentioned Tom Brady, and I know he's a hot topic. You love him or hate him, but love him or hate him, I mean, you got to listen to his interviews. I mean, his interviews are almost flawless, the way he talks and puts his team before himself. I mean, you're talking about, in my opinion, okay, I'll throw that out there, in my opinion, the greatest football player of all time, or at least the greatest quarterback. And yet, you listen to him and it's teammates and it's teamwork and it's, still making adjustments and it's love of the game. And it's just, he just has so much appreciation for everything. Gratitude, I guess, would be a great way to put it. So I mean, Tom would be another guy. Could I have Wayne? Could I have cocktails with one and then dinner with the other?
You could have both of them for dinner. You could have both of them for dessert, cocktails. So it's your question. So we're going to change lanes here for a minute to what I call our hot seat questions. And the only thing we ask is you just spit out the first thing that comes to mind.
Okay.
If you had one last meal and you could choose absolutely anything, what would you choose?
Chicken enchiladas.
Favorite sport?
Oh, man. To play or to watch?
Either or.
To play would be golf. To watch would be playoff hockey.
Favorite team?
Man, you're killing me right now. Patriots.
Favorite smell?
New glove.
Favorite quote?
Brian Cain. Don't count the days, make the days count.
Do you have an all-time favorite movie?
I don't. I'm not one. I'm too much of a movie person. So like comedies, yeah, Dumb and Dumber for comedies, 100%.
Want to hear the most annoying noise?
Yeah. But I mean, there's so many great movies. I don't.
What is your favorite book, or do you have an all-time favorite book?
I guess I could go with The Mental Game of Baseball. I believe it was Harvey Dorfman. It was the book I picked up in college when I decided that this was going to be something that I was really, 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 really going to give a shot at. And I knew that I had to fix one thing in particular, and that was my brain. And so I picked up that book just because it said mental and it said baseball in the title.
Favorite singer, group, or band?
Oh, man. This is along the same lines as movies, because I'm as big of a movie fan as I'm a bigger music fan, but I'll give you one. I can't go wrong with Metallica.
And if you were stuck in a foxhole, you can only have one person to have your back. Who would that be?
Gosh. The Rock.
Ooh, great one. You can make you laugh and probably kick some ass doing it.
That's right.
So what's the best way for our listeners to either connect with you or find out more about you as well as your company?
Yeah, absolutely. You can head on over to jonahbayliss.com. That's JONAHBAYLISS. The name of the program is Prove Yourself Right. And there's some Twitter handles. You can see it. Rather than go through all the Twitter accounts and Instagram, just head over to the website and you can find all that stuff. But I'm all over getting this thing rolling. And please reach out. One of my personal core values in my life is connection. meaning connecting with other people. So, questions, if anyone's got them, please reach out and let's get a conversation rolling.
Awesome. And then wanted to ask you, last question is if you have any parting words you'd like to leave with our listeners today.
Prove yourself right. Internalize that motivation. External motivation, it will work. It'll spark things. When I think of external motivation, I think of like when I was working out in the gym sometimes, and when I'm trying to get that little extra rep, I might think of one of my competitors, and I might think of him doing it, like he's doing that rep. That means I need to do 2 more. So those little external motivations, they'll work. They'll get you a little bit extra here and there. But that internal motivation is going to sustain that fire and keep you committed to whatever you want.
Awesome. Well, listen, I truly appreciate not only your time, but also what you shared with us today, and definitely look forward to connecting again soon.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure anytime.
Today's episode is sponsored by the good people over at West Fair Communications, who publish the Westchester County Business Journal and the Fairfield County Business Journal. These newspapers do a wonderful job in covering all aspects of the business world within 2 of the most influential markets in the New York metropolitan area. You can also take advantage of their daily news feeds, which keep track on the companies and thought leaders in these important regions. For more information, take a look at www.westfaironline.com. Trust me, once you start reading, you won't quit. Thank you for listening to episode number 228. Jonah shared some really interesting things when it comes to both internal and external motivation. In my professional and athletic career, I fully grasp how both of them are so key and important individually, but when they both exist together, that's when you become unstoppable. One thing Jonah mentioned regarding his morning routine that I really liked was how he shared the importance of being not too rigid, but if you fall off one day, just make sure that you get back at it the next. As we wrap up today's episode, I want to pose one question to you. Are you looking to prove other people wrong? Or instead, are you looking to prove yourself right? No matter what you're looking to do, accomplish, and or become, internalize your motivation. And as you go for your greatness today, instead of focusing your time and efforts on proving others wrong, concentrate on becoming the best version of you for you. And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.